10 billion versus one vision. How Traore sparked Africa's financial uprising. Imagine this: a continent blessed with gold, oil, diamonds, and the youngest population on Earth, yet still borrowing its future from the very powers that once ruled it. And then, one young African leader stands up and says, "No more." That leader is Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, and what he does next will shake the global financial system. This is the story of how a $10 billion promise met one man's vision, and how that moment sparked what people are calling Africa's financial uprising. It all starts with a crisis. The CFA franc, a currency created during colonial times, is collapsing. Prices are skyrocketing. People are losing faith in their banks. In cities across West Africa, panic spreads like wildfire. In Burkina Faso, small business owners can't buy supplies because the currency's value keeps changing. Farmers start trading in gold dust and grain instead of paper money. Everywhere, one question echoes: if our money isn't truly ours, then who really owns our freedom? For decades, many African nations have used currencies tied directly to Europe's central banks. That means when Paris or Brussels adjust their interest rates, millions of African lives are affected, without a single African voice in the decision. It's like being chained to someone else's heartbeat. But in 2025, something breaks. The CFA collapses faster than anyone expected, and while some leaders rush to foreign embassies for help, one young soldier-turned-president refuses. Ibrahim Traoré doesn't call for loans. He calls for liberation. While panic spreads, a new offer lands on the table. A group of U.S. investors and officials fly to Accra, Ghana. They bring with them a glittering proposal, something called Project AfroDollar. The plan? To create a brand new digital currency for Africa, backed by $10 billion in American gold reserves, linked to the U.S. financial system, marketed as Africa's path to modernization. The numbers are jaw-dropping. $10 billion in starting capital, infrastructure partnerships with tech giants, and even satellite access for rural internet banking. On the surface, it looks like a dream deal. But to many African thinkers, it feels familiar. One Ghanaian economist says quietly, "When freedom comes with a signature from Washington, is it still freedom?" Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré is watching carefully. He knows that the same system offering a helping hand has already controlled Africa's wealth for decades. This isn't about money, it's about power. So when his advisors show him the $10 billion proposal, he simply says, "Africa's value doesn't come with a price tag." That single line spreads across social media like wildfire. Within hours, where Africa owns its future is trending across the continent. In the following week, leaders from Mali, Niger, and Guinea contact Traoré. They all agree on one thing: it's time to talk about an African currency initiative, a system owned, designed, and governed by Africans themselves. But not everyone is on board. In neighboring countries like Ivory Coast and Senegal, politicians warn that breaking from the CFA will trigger chaos. They argue that Western alliances bring stability, not control. But the people see it differently. From students in Ghana to miners in Mali, the message is clear: if others control our currency, they control our destiny. Across Africa, millions begin asking questions that were once whispered only in classrooms or protests. Why do our richest resources buy us so little freedom? Why do our leaders keep borrowing in foreign currencies? And why does every promise of development come with new strings attached? These questions fuel a movement, and Traoré becomes its face. Then the world reacts. In Paris, French officials hold emergency meetings. They call Traoré's movement dangerous populism. In Washington, financial experts warn that rejecting the $10 billion offer could collapse entire economies. On global TV, commentators ask whether this young leader is brave or reckless. But Traoré doesn't back down. He gives a speech that changes everything. Standing before the African Monetary Union, he declares, "Africa cannot trade one master for another. Our money must rise from our own soil, backed by our own labor and guided by our own dreams." The hall goes silent. Then applause erupts like thunder. For the first time, leaders from several nations publicly endorse a new path. Not the CFA, not the AfroDollar, but an African sovereign currency built on regional resources, technology, and shared trust. Soon, countries begin pledging their assets. Mali offers gold, Niger contributes uranium, Nigeria hints at oil backing, and smaller nations commit agricultural surpluses as part of the foundation. It's not just about economics, it's about unity. For decades, Africa has been divided by colonial borders drawn on European maps. Now, for the first time, those same nations are trying to draw a new map of their own, an economic one. But the big powers don't plan to watch quietly. France calls the initiative a direct threat to European economic interests. The US labels it financial isolationism, and even China, while smiling publicly, begins lobbying behind closed doors to link Africa's new currency to the digital yuan. Suddenly, Africa isn't just the stage, it's the prize. As tensions grow, Traore makes another bold move. He orders that Burkina Faso begin using its own transitional note for domestic trade. It's small at first, just local circulation. But symbolically, it's massive. For the first time in 75 years, the country is using money not printed or approved by any foreign power. Street vendors hold the new notes like sacred paper. One woman says to a journalist, "For once, I'm buying bread with my own nation's name on it." That single sentence captures the spirit of the movement better than any economic report ever could. Weeks later, protests erupt in countries still tied to the CFA system. In Senegal, thousands march through Dakar waving homemade banners that read, "Free our money." In Ivory Coast, students chant Traore's name in solidarity. Even in Ghana, where leaders are cautious, people begin to talk openly about joining the initiative. The momentum is unstoppable. But so is the backlash. Foreign investors begin pulling out. Credit agencies lower ratings. Western news outlets publish alarming headlines. Africa risks collapse. New dictatorship rises. Economic suicide. Yet on the ground, ordinary Africans feel something new. Hope. Because for the first time, their struggle isn't about which superpower to please. It's about which future to build. Then comes the global confrontation. At a UN summit in Geneva, Traore faces Western and Asian leaders. Tensions are high. Reporters expect fireworks, and they get exactly that. When asked whether he's rejecting Western aid, Traore calmly replies, "We are not rejecting friendship. We are rejecting control. Partnership without respect is still colonization." The room freezes. Cameras flash. And within hours, that quote becomes one of the most shared lines on social media. Every major network runs the story. CNN calls him the man who said no to 10 billion. African youth call him the father of financial freedom. And in the streets, murals of Traore start appearing beside slogans like, "One Vision, One Africa." By late 2025, something unthinkable happens. A group of African economists, supported by universities and fintech startups, officially register the African Currency Initiative, or ACI. It's not a political project, it's a people's project. They design a hybrid currency system, combining blockchain transparency with resource-backed reserves. Their idea is simple. Every digital coin or paper note should represent real African value: gold, copper, oil, food, or energy. No imaginary wealth, no dependency on foreign approval. Within months, the pilot program begins. Small cross-border trades between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are conducted using the new digital token. For the first time in modern history, African nations trade with each other using a currency created entirely by Africans. It's small, symbolic, but revolutionary. The global reaction is immediate. Wall Street warns of a new economic disorder. European banks quietly begin diversifying their African holdings. China accelerates its own digital trade systems to stay ahead, and the US government freezes parts of its African aid, demanding fiscal transparency. But on social media, none of that matters. Millions of young Africans now see Traore not as a president, but as a symbol of change. Videos of his speeches flood TikTok and YouTube. His words are translated into 20 languages. The phrase "Africa's financial uprising" becomes part of everyday conversation. For decades, Africa's story was written by outsiders. Now, for the first time, it's being narrated by its own people. Still, not everyone is celebrating. Some African elites, long tied to Western systems, fear losing influence. They warn that the new initiative could isolate Africa from global trade. Economists debate whether resource-backed currencies can survive in the digital age. Even within Africa, skepticism grows, but Traore remains calm. He repeats the same message everywhere he goes. Freedom is never easy, but nothing we build for ourselves can be taken away. His speeches aren't just about money anymore. They're about dignity, about rewriting Africa's relationship with the world. By the end of the year, the pilot ACI system shows results. Local economies in Burkina Faso and Mali stabilize. Small farmers are paid faster through digital wallets. Foreign remittance fees drop by half. And for the first time, young African programmers are leading the continent's biggest financial innovation. Then, in December 2025, a historic headline flashes across global news. African Currency Initiative completes. First $100 million trade deal without Western banks. The world can hardly believe it. The trade is between Nigeria, Mali, and Burkina Faso, using only the new African system. It's a small transaction for the global market, but symbolically it's the birth of a new era. That same night, Traore gives one of his most powerful speeches. We were told Africa could never stand on its own, that our strength was always borrowed. But today we prove them wrong. Our destiny is no longer for sale. The crowd roars. Fireworks light up the sky. And in that moment, something shifts, not just politically, but spiritually. For the first time in generations, millions of Africans believe that economic freedom is possible. Of course, challenges remain. Powerful nations won't let go easily. Trade wars, digital sabotage, and political pressure are already underway. But the idea is out, and no force on earth can unthink it. Maybe the new African currency will stumble. Maybe it will take decades to grow. But one thing is certain. The continent has tasted the possibility of true sovereignty. And once a people discover their worth, no empire can ever convince them otherwise. So in the end, this isn't just about a $10 billion offer. It's about one vision, one that refuses to sell. Africa's future for another century of promises. But no matter how you see him, he did something extraordinary. He made Africa believe again. Because sometimes all it takes to start a revolution, $10 billion promised a future. One vision rewrote it.